I've quit a lot of things in my life, and every time I quit, it pays off massively. I've had multiple different jobs, different ambitions. My path through life has not been linear. I went from being a stand up comedian to a debt collector to a real estate agent, and now I'm in property management. My success has been increasing throughout my life pretty steadily because I'm not afraid to pivot when life changes. I change my strategy when the game changes. I have a friend that I've known since I was 16. I met him when we were both becoming stand up comedians. This guy has doubled down and tripled down on the stand up comedy dream time and time again for the last 13 years. And the time when he was closest to reaching that goal was when we first started, when we were 16. He's been on a steady decline ever since then. It's obviously not working for him, but he keeps trying and trying and trying, and he never gives up. Now, that sounds admirable. He's determined. But now he has nothing going for him. But he refuses to let go of that identity and pivot onto a new path. You can't get so attached to whatever you're doing, whether it's a job or a hobby or a relationship. You can't get so attached that you allow the sunk cost fallacy to sink you. When I was 18, I had been doing stand up for a couple of years. I knew that I was done with it. I could feel it in my gut. Every time I showed up to an open mic, I knew I didn't want to do this anymore. I never wanted to spend time writing material. I hated doing open mics at stir-fry restaurants and cupcake shops trying to get stage time. I was done. But all my friends and family would constantly ask about stand-up every time I saw them, and I had forsaken the traditional path of going to college and getting a normal job for the sake of stand-up. And so I really felt guilty quitting. I would imagine the scenario of having to show up to Thanksgiving and everybody would ask me, how stand-up's going, when's my next show, and I would have to tell them, actually I quit stand-up. It was like I was letting everybody down in a way. I ended up going to Chicago when I turned 18 under the guise of chasing my dream of comedy, when in reality, I wanted just to get away from everybody so that I could quiet quit stand-up comedy. The period between when you have that gut feeling in your stomach where you know that you have to make a change, you know that you have to stop what you're doing, you want to quit, and the day that you actually quit, all of that in between time is wasted. If you know that you have to quit your job, you know in your gut that it's inevitable and it's all you want to do, but you convince yourself to stay for a year until eventually you quit anyways, that's a year wasted. When I was having my first kid, I knew that I had to pivot and stop doing real estate sales full time because the income was unpredictable. I knew it would be a great side gig while I had a salaried income to reliably support my family, but I was so deep into the culture on my sales team. I was in a mentorship role. I was one of the top salespeople. I had a lot of respect, and I had some great friends who know nothing about real estate. They would never dream of quitting. So I knew that quitting would be something that they didn't understand. But having a kid just changed my life in a way where the path that I was on no longer fit the mold for what I needed to do. I knew that I had to quit, but I put it off for an entire year. I told myself that business might pick up again. But I knew I didn't want to put that effort in anymore to make that happen. I was having a lot of trouble getting into sales mode, getting into work mode after hanging out with my daughter. I couldn't, hang out with her, be in dad mode, and then put her down for a nap and then start hammering the phones. I couldn't do it anymore. I told myself that I had $20,000 in retirement savings that I could pull from to buy time. And so that's what I did. that $20,000 lasted me about a year. And only as that money was running out, and so my options were running out, did I end up getting another job just like I knew I needed to do from the very beginning, and it ended up being exactly what I needed. It was a great decision. I forged a great new career for myself in a short amount of time while retaining real estate as a side income, and now I'm making as much money as I ever did in real estate back in the golden years of, COVID, right? That's all great news. It's fantastic that I was able to set my life up like this. But the thing is, I knew I should have done that a year before I did. And if I had just pulled the trigger and quit right when I knew that I had to, then I wouldn't have burned through $20,000 of retirement savings. We all know that feeling. The gut feeling where you know what you're doing isn't working, but we convince ourselves to ignore it. It isn't just for jobs. Like I said at the start, it also is for hobbies that you no longer enjoy, but you've made a part of your identity. It also goes for relationships that you know are a net negative to your life, but you keep pushing, hoping that it'll change. Every time that I've quit a job, a hobby, a relationship, it always was a great decision. I've never regretted quitting. Another thing I realized when it comes to quitting hobbies is that you don't have to do everything right now. I had a podcast with my cousin. We would record every Monday. It was enjoyable, but I had a 1-year-old. While we were doing the podcast, he just had a newborn. I knew I'd be having another kid pretty soon, and it was just too much to spend Monday evenings recording on top of me having to edit this entire podcast all on my own, on top of being a dad and doing jiu-jitsu, and I just started a new job in a new industry. It's just too much. And I ended up telling my cousin that this just doesn't fit into my life right now, and it's only going to get worse the longer that we put it off. I knew I'd want to do something like that in the future. I enjoyed doing it, but it just didn't fit into my life right now. There's always going to be a time for a podcast in the future. This channel is kind of an alternative to that. It's more flexible, less effort, but I can still, get my voice out there, speak my thoughts. And this fits into my life, how it currently is. Another example is jiu-jitsu. I still train jiu-jitsu, and I don't think I'll quit anytime soon. But before my daughter was born, I trained 5 days a week. Now that I have 2 kids and a full-time job, I can't train 5 days a week. I train once or twice a week. There's a lot of guys who have life get in the way of their training, and they feel really guilty about not being able to train as much as they would be able to if they had no responsibilities. As much as they see some of their training partners train because they have no responsibilities. They feel guilty that the people who they came up with still train 5 days a week, and they get better than them. And they get outpaced by the people they used to be able to beat. But you can't let yourself feel guilty when your priorities shift. Jiu-jitsu isn't everything, right? It's just a hobby. There's going to come a day when I'll be able to invest more time into my hobby. But there's ebbs and flows, and things shift in life, and it's okay to cut back on things or quit when the time calls for that. Time is a resource, and it has to be spent wisely. The only regrets in my life don't come from quitting. It comes from investing too much time into something that wasn't serving the bigger picture. That's all I really have to say on it. I'm sure everybody kind of relates to this on some level. Tell me in the comments, what are you going to quit? When has quitting paid off for you in the past? And if you like this content, please like and subscribe and watch my other videos. Thank you.